Okay, so today we are going to make calzones, but first we have to make the dough. So I'm going to use the recipe from Bud Kitchen, Party Grub, everyday pizza dough. Also, I'm not sponsored by Bud Kitchen, I have no affiliation with them. It'd be cool if I did, but I just really like their recipes, so that's what I'll predominantly be using. So first, we gotta whisk the flour and salt together. So we need 4 cups of flour. Okay, 4 cups of flour, and this is a ½ teaspoon of salt. Okay, so I never measure out ½ teaspoons because I'm lazy, and also that just dirties dishes that we don't have to do, so I'm just gonna sprinkle some salt up in here. Alright. It's totally legit, guys. So then mix all of that together so the salt isn't just all in one spot. Because that'd be sad for our dough. Okay. So now we gotta get the yeast ready to go. So we need 1 3/4 cups of warm water. And the book says that the temperature of tea that you could tell used to be warm, but has been sitting out for a couple minutes, so not too hot. You don't want to kill the yeast with the hot water. So 1 3/4 cups. And then you need just a tiny bit of sugar. Another ½ teaspoon, just to let the yeast thing get started to be able to eat stuff so it can live forever, when in reality we're going to murder it after we bake it. Which is kind of a dick move on our part, but you know, gotta do what you gotta do for bread. So I let the yeast prove and cover it up with a tea towel and let it have a nice warm setting so it'll rise. Now it says, in a small glass, mix together the warm water, yeast, and sugar, and wait a couple minutes and see if the glass looks kind of foamy at the top. Nothing happens, then your yeast is old as shit and it died, so you need to get some new stuff. Rip. So let's wait a few minutes and see if it rises. Hopefully it does. Okay, so it's been a few minutes and our yeast water looks nice and yeasty. It should smell like bread does, you know, so should have that going for us. So what I usually do, it says when the yeast is ready to go, pour the whole glass into the flour bowl. I usually make a nice little divot in the flour for all the water and yeast to go. Just because, I don't know why, honestly, there's no reason for that, so you do you, but that's what I do. And mix all that together. Some people will use wooden spoons for their bread mixtures. I usually just use the bigger metal one. I think that the dough sticks to the wood too much and it bugs me, but whatever makes you happy when you're baking. So it should come together into a shiny dough, but there is still some flour in. As you can see, there is still some flour. It's not part of the dough, so I'm going to add a tiny bit more water. Don't go nuts with the water, just kind of add a little bit at a time because you don't want to add too much water because then you're adding more flour and it's a whole thing. And the thing about one thing I've learned while watching the Great British Baking Show, because it's an awesome show, is that most official professional bakers use the weight system. They use grams. It's a more accurate way of measuring flour and other baking products because depends on a lot of things. Like every bit of flour can measure different. I can measure a cup of flour and you can measure a cup of flour and it could be a different amount of flour. And in our case, you could add more water or less water than I am just because of the moisture in the flour as well. It all depends. So knead for a few minutes until you get a nice, that's still too, okay. Add a little bit of flour. I added too much water. So be careful with that shit. Alright, so you want to knead until it becomes a nice, like, smooth ball. You don't have to go nuts, you don't have to get it out of the bowl or anything, just kind of throw it around in there until it looks like dough. Also, it helps to have your oven preheated to like the lowest it'll go, like 170, because that will help give it a little bit of heat to rise. So once that seems like a nice, like this is what I got for my dough. Should look pretty smooth, but yeah, not perfect. And then you're going to kind of cover it all in olive oil and then roll it around so it doesn't get sticky, because you don't want the dough to stick to the towel. My first couple times of baking bread, I had no idea what I was doing, and it got all up on that towel, and that towel is ruined. So make sure you've got some oil in there so it doesn't stick. Believe me, you don't want to deal with that. And then you're gonna let it rise for about an hour and a half so it doubles in size. Okay, so I'm putting it, I covered it in the tea towel, doused in olive oil on the inside, and now I'm going to put it in the oven. Turn your oven off when you put it in there, you just want it to be a little warm. And then you also need to leave the door open because you don't want it to burn. Okay, so now we are going to work on the filling while we're waiting for the dough to rise. So my recipe that I'm using is still from Thug Kitchen, same book. It's tempeh and spinach calzones with almond ricotta. We're gonna substitute a few things though because. So warm up your oven. We can't do that yet because we're still waiting for the dough, but we can start making the filling. So grab a skillet or wok. I'm a cast iron girl myself, but you do you. And it says just a tiny bit of olive oil. Technically it says 2 teaspoons of olive oil, but I just kind of throw some in there and it usually works out okay. Okay, wait for that to warm up. In the meantime, we're gonna get our tempeh out. Tempeh is awesome. Never had it. It's got a pretty nice crumbly texture and it's good for like sausage or other crumbled meat substitutes. You could use it for sloppy joes. It's also really good for making bacon. Like surprisingly good for making bacon. It's just really hard to get out of the wrapper though, which is kind of annoying. So heads up, if you buy tempeh, which you should, this is good. It's a bitch to get out. Alright, so wait for that to get going. You also need a chopped onion, some minced garlic. As far as garlic goes, it says 3 cloves, but you know, garlic is subjective, so we usually do more like 5 or 6. We like garlic in this house. Also, I'm very lucky in that my boyfriend does it for me because for some reason I just cannot stand chopping garlic. Something about it is just really annoying. I don't know. Yay, boyfriend. Okay. So, in your hands, you're going to take the tempeh and you're going to kind of crumble it up. No bigger than the size of like a nickel. And if it is too big, like you got a harder time crumbling it up, you can always crumble it up more once it's in the pan with your spoon. Or spatula. Don't be afraid of the tempeh, guys. It's good. Please try it. You don't have to be vegan to eat vegan food. Okay, so sometimes tempeh is good to have in big chunks, like when you're making bacon or lunch meat. but in this case we're going to want to crumple it up pretty small because you're making it like sausage in a calzone. And I don't know about you, but back when I would eat sausage in pizzas and things like that, I usually had the smaller size pieces of sausage. So like a familiarity comfort level, I like it pretty small. If you like big hunks of sausage in your calzones, then you know, I guess you can leave them a little bit bigger. You do you. As long as you're happy with what you're eating, that's all that matters. The cool thing about tempeh is that it is fermented soybean. Don't ask me how that works. I am not a maker of tempeh at this point in my life. But if you're not into soy, from what I understand, or I saw at Natural Grocers the other day, there is now a fermented pumpkin seed tempeh, which I am super curious about. So if any of you try it, please let me know how that is, because I am intrigued. But regular tempeh is way cheaper and poor. So. Okay. So wait for it to start to brown in about 5 minutes or so. And then add the onion. I love onion. Oh yeah. Okay. So, like I said, you're gonna wait for the tempeh to brown a little bit because you'll want it to be, you know, cooked. About 5 more minutes. Then we need to get soy sauce, fennel seeds, dried basil, oregano, and thyme. I have everything except for basil right now because my basil plant is mad at me. For real, that's actually what's happening. But I do have thyme. Soy sauce is not just for topping off your Chinese food. I use it all the time when I'm cooking. It's a nice way to round out flavor, add some acidity. Because like, and they talk about this a lot in these cookbooks, you know, like Americans, we have so much sodium. We want more acidity in our foods, and we think that just means salt. I mean, sometimes it does. Who doesn't like salt? But you need other things too. Like you could use lemon juice or vinegar. I also use a lot of vinegar in my cooking. Whether it's fries or balsamic, white wine. I like it. I like acidic foods. Okay. So it's been a few minutes, and now I'm going to add that soy sauce, which this says 1 tablespoon, but I'm just gonna throw shit in there. And then this here, teaspoon of oregano, thyme. I'm a really big fan of the fennel seeds because it really does make it taste like Italian sausage. I hate these little shakers though. Stir all that up. Okay, and then it says to fold in the spinach. This says it's called for 6 cups of spinach. I have arugula, so that's what we're going to use. Same concept, a little more peppery of the flavor. but it gets the point across. And I'm just going to assume this is 6 cups. If you are desperate, kale will also probably work, but I think that would be a little too much of a weird texture, personally. But like I keep saying, as long as you're happy with what you made, and kale is good for you, so make it work. I would not use cabbage or like iceberg lettuce in this because I just don't think that those things cook well. We don't like hot welted lettuce. But leafy greens like spinach, arugula, kale, those are all good for this. Okay. And then also the garlic. And then the recipe calls for lemon juice, but I forgot to buy lemons. So I'm going to pour a tiny bit apple cider vinegar in instead. Just a little bit to give that some acidity without like overpowering it. Yeah, it's looking great. It smells really good too. Okay, so your pan should look something like that right now. My nice penis pot holders. Okay, so look at that cast iron, that's going to continue to cook it because it's just going to keep going. Okay, so now we're going to make the almond ricotta filling. And when I say almond ricotta, I mean that's really loose considering we're not going to use almonds because I love almonds, but they're really bad for the environment. And considering that most of our almonds in the US are grown in California where there's a fucking drought and they're using all the water to take care of the almond trees, and I think it's just a real big dick move. So we're gonna use sunflower seeds, which I think kind of gets the point across well enough. Alright, so don't be scared away by tofu. You're going to blend all this shit together. I know it looks weird, it's in a little box. You don't have to refrigerate it. But don't be scared away. It's good stuff. This is super versatile too. You can make like shakes and like cheesecakes and all that extra yummy good shit out of it, which I think is kind of awesome. I like versatility. Alright, so we are going to use my super old great grandma's blender because it still works, and if it still works, then no problem. Someday I will have a food processor, and it's gonna be great, but right now I don't, so here we are. So you're gonna throw the tofu in there, like the weird looking block of goo it is. It says to chop up garlic, but I already got my boyfriend to chop up a couple cloves for me already, and I don't think he'll enjoy coming back to make more. But also, we're gonna blend this shit anyway, so it doesn't need to be chopped if we're gonna throw it in the blender. Nah. So it says 2. I'm using 3 because I like garlic. Alright, and then it needs olive oil. And again, still out of lemons because it hasn't been very long since I started this in the process. So we're gonna put some apple cider vinegar in there. It's totally fine. Tastes mostly the same. And then I need some nutritional yeast, which sounds weird, but it's also very versatile. I like to use it for Parmesan cheese. It's also really great to make like cheese out of with other things like cashews. And in this case, ricotta. All right. And then sunflowers. Okay, gonna blend that shit up. It's gonna be great. Alright. And now we have ricotta. Okay, so you can layer the shit so you've got like filling and then cheese, or you can just throw all that shit in together, and that's what I'm gonna do because you're gonna put it all into a giant hot pocket anyway. It doesn't matter if it's layered or not. I'm not about that life. If you want to, that's cool. If you do, take pictures and send them to me because I want to see them. But I'm not about that life. So I'm just gonna throw all the shit together in there. And then also, one thing I forgot to add earlier, is red pepper flakes. I'm almost out of this, so it's not like I'm just dumping a whole jar into this. I'm just pouring a little bit. This is really good to have that in there too. If you like spicy food, then add more. I usually just dip these in hot sauce or like pasta sauce with pepper flakes in that too. I like spicy food, but my roommate doesn't, so I usually try to make the main course not that spicy and then just make hot sauce or salsa to go with it. Okay, so our finished product so far should look like this, or something similar. And now we just have to wait for that dough to rise. Okay, so this part here is where I am bound to make a mess. Something about flour and rolling dough out, I can't not make a mess. So we're in an apron now. Okay, so your dough should have risen about twice as much as it was, and mine did. It did get a little cold just now. I took it out of the oven, so I think it's starting to deflate a little bit on me. That's okay because we gotta punch it down anyway. Okay, then you're gonna want to take flour, make your counter a nice flour surface. This is where I start making a mess. I'm an adult, I swear. Alright, and then cover the flour too. You want to dust it with it so that the rolling pin won't stick to it. And roll it out. You don't have to go too crazy. We're not making sugar cookies or anything, or pie crust. We're just making it so that it's a little more easily spread out, so we can cut it to make our calzones. Okay, yeah, so it's not to be perfect, doesn't have to be super whatever, just spread out enough. And I've got this super cute little pastry cutter. So this should make about 8. So I'm just going to cut in half-ish, and then cut that in half. There we go. Let's put that with that. This is fine. Everything's fine. Okay, so you should have about 8. You might make a little bit more than that. I usually have a little bit of filling left over, but the point is there. So I'm going to transfer a slice at a time over to this cutting board so I have a little more space. So I'm pressing it out. And the cool thing about calzones is Like I know we've all seen them when they're in that perfect moon shape. It doesn't matter what they look like, as long as it tastes good. I'm not super into making perfect foods because it's just me and my roommate and my boyfriend, and we don't need perfect, we just need good. So you're going to sprinkle some of this on there, so it should be a nice little ball, as you can see. Then you're going to fold it over like an awkward looking wonton kind of thing. I'm going to spread out the fillings a little bit so it's not just a ball with dough all around it. Then I'm going to fold over the dough. Like that. And then get a fork and you're going to crimp down so it stays together. Isn't that beautiful? It's kind of beautiful. I know it says not be perfect, but this does look pretty good. And then you're going to cut a little hole in it so steam can get out, and you don't have a bunch of calzones exploding you in the oven, because that'd be a bit of a downer after all this work. You're gonna do the same thing 7 more times so you have 8 calzones all together. Okay, so the last thing we need to do after we have our beautiful calzones ready to go. I'm proud of us. Proud of me. This is good. It says to spray the tops with a little oil. I don't have a spray thing, but I do have a little brushy guy, and I have olive oil, so I'm just gonna brush the tops so they don't get like burnt and shit, and they get that nice goldeny look when they're done baking. It's gonna be good. If you do have spray oil, you know, feel free to do that. This is what I've got though, so that's what I'm gonna use. Use what you have, you know? If you felt like going crazy, you could even like melt some butter and use that. And like I said, make sure that you put a vent in the calzones, because the last thing you're gonna want is exploding calzones in your oven. I can only imagine that would be a bitch to clean up. And then your oven should be preheated at 425. And it says to cook until those fuckers are nice and golden, about 15-20 minutes. Alright, and I just took them out of the oven. They're nice and golden. They didn't explode because we put holes in them. Yay, venting. And you should have 8 beautiful calzones. Typically I just serve them with red sauce, because it's pretty like hot sauce would probably also be good. You do you. Whatever you like to dip your shit into, use that. So the next time to learn how to make apple pies.